Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Randy Kraft, also known as the Scorecard Killer. But before I jump into that, just a couple of housekeeping things. So, I will not be doing my weekly true crime and chill later this week into this weekend because my co-host, one of them, over on the podcast, Mr. Beckham, will be coming to Boston. Him and his girlfriend are coming to visit. So with that being said, I will not be on YouTube. However, it occurred to me earlier today that I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hilarious stories from Beckham coming to visit. So I think me and him will have to do not just a true crime and chill next weekend, but kind of a Boston trip recap. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and start the case of Randy Kraft. So Randy Kraft was born on March 19th, 1945 in Long Beach, California. He was the fourth child and the only son in his family. In 1948, the family moved to Westminster, California. In 1963, Randy graduated from high school and went on to Claremont Men's College. At Claremont, Randy joined the ROTC and he demonstrated in support of the Vietnam War and campaigned for conservative presidential candidate Barry Goldwater in 1964. The following year, Randy began working as a bartender at a local gay bar. Around this time, he became friends, and his friends started to notice his frequent use of Valium. He said he used it to stop stomach pains and migraine headaches. In 1968, Randy graduated with his bachelor's degree in economics. But by this time, Randy's political views, they completely shifted, and he began working for Robert Kennedy's political campaign. Also in 1968, Randy joined the U.S. Air Force. Due to his high marks on aptitude tests and background checks, he was provided with high security clearances. He was also posted to Edwards Air Force Base. Just want to give a quick shout out. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Mimi. Thank you for joining. Hope you guys are having a great start to your week so far. So Robert, in 1969, he came out to his family as being gay. He was also discharged from the Air Force on, quote, medical, end quote, grounds that year. So Robert returned to bartending. In 1971, Randy found work at a bottled water plant in Huntington Beach driving a forklift. At night, he would cruise the gay bars. Randy enrolled briefly at Long Beach State University, taking education courses with a goal of teaching credentials. However, his partying ways got in the way of his education. How many stories have we heard about that? Not just in the true crime world, but I know we all know somebody whose partying ways in colleges completely derailed their plans. Quickly, hi Capone, good to see you. So jealous that you're in Vegas. I know. Speak of the devil. Here I give Mr. Beckham a shout out because y'all are coming to visit and he's not even here for this show. Absolutely. I don't know why I have him on my true crime and chills because he's not even subscribed to the channel. But thank you for reminding me. Hi, James. Of course I am back. Hi, Renee. Good to see you. Okay. So back to our friend Randy. So a classmate of Randy's named Jeff Graves eventually moved in with him and they became lovers. Although now in a relationship, that did not stop Randy from cruising the bars for gay men. On January 24th, 1975, a task force was now formed due to the increase in local murders. Sheriff officers from Orange, Imperial, and San Bernardino counties attended, as well as police representatives from Los Angeles, Long Beach, Seal Beach, and the Huntington Beach area. An FBI profiler from Quantico, Virginia, and a special investigator from California State Attorney General Office also joined, along with several forensic psychologists. So clearly, they were assembling quite a team to analyze this. Various murders were compared. However, none of them offered any insight leads. Dr. E. Mansell Patterson from UC Irvine profiled the murderer as a man who, quote, desires to be masculine, but does not feel masculine, gnawing the nipples and genitals of his prey to symbolically make the victim a female, end quote. That is a very powerful profile statement. I have to say, out of all the cases I've researched with profiling, I don't think I've heard any of them as specific as that statement. So keep that in mind as we continue. Let's see. Hi, David Ellis. Good to see you. Danny, I have you on the background while I'm working. I beyond approve of that, Mimi. However, I can't help if while you're working, if you're working on any documents, if like murder words kind of get slipped into your documents. I'd actually be very proud of myself if that happened. But enjoy as you're working. Hello, Beckham. Welcome. Hi, Liz. Good to see you. All right, Randy. So there's a lot to cover with Randy. I do have to say this was quite a long and complex case. So I did my best to kind of bring you guys like the most important kind of details of the case. But yeah, it's pretty intense. So, all right. So we just got that profile. And in 1979, Randy was now a freelance data processing consultant, and he was very successful at it. He bought a home in July 1979 in Long Beach. He had a 19-year-old named Jeff Sealing move in with him. They traveled together to Mexico in August 1978, Lake Tahoe in May 1979, plus an extended East Coast tour from New York City to Key West. Friends recall that Randy and Jeff kept, quote, bizarre hours, end quote. Jeff operated a bakery while Randy continued his tradition of cruising the gay bars for men. By August 1980, Randy was consulting for Lear Sigler Industries, LSI, with regional offices in Michigan, Oregon, and San Diego. Between his normal salary and weekend freelance work, he earned at least $50,000 a year in 1980 and 1981. Again, put that in perspective. $50,000 a year, not bad nowadays, but back then that was a big salary. So keep that in mind. Randy's employers described him as, quote, a self-starter, end quote, and an excellent problem solver and an exceptional employee who deserves exceptional treatment. That part is very interesting. That deserves exceptional treatment. I've never heard that described by an employee before. Maybe you have, not sure. All right, what is Beckham chirping about here in the chat? Oh my goodness. Hey, Undercover Mermaid, good to see you. $50,000 a year in those days, you were considered rich. Absolutely. That was a big salary back then. I mean, even now, I know of people that don't even make $50,000 a year, depending on the field that they're in. Granted, nowadays with the cost of rent and cost of living, that would be a tough income to go by. But with that being said, I do know of people that don't make that much per year. So to think of this amount back then is just astronomical. It is very, very well off, like you said, Mimi. James. All right. So in June 1982, Randy and Jeff started going to counseling together. Their therapist described Jeff as defensive and anxious with an insatiable sex drive. Randy resented Jeff's efforts to dominate the relationship. They planned a European vacation to help solve their problems, but neither of them seemed to have the time to actually make it work and book a trip. Therapy sessions were frequently interrupted by Randy's travels for work. 1983, on a summer morning, Orange County officers pulled over Randy for weaving. He got out of his car and began walking toward the cruiser, but he was doing so in a polite manner. The suspicious officers walked Randy back to his car, and they found the body of Terry Gramble slumped over dead in the passenger seat of his car. He had been strangled with a belt. The police background check on Randy revealed a 1966 arrest for lewd conduct in Huntington Beach. In 1967, he had graduated from college with a degree in economics in the Air Force. only to be discharged. 1975, police saw he was arrested again for lewd conduct with another man. This time, he spent 5 days in jail and just paid a small fine. Well, officers searched Randy's car, and what they found was 47 photos of young men, some nude, some unconscious, and some dead. A briefcase contained a notebook with more than 60 messages, but they were written in code. When searching Randy's home, they found photos of 3 men whose deaths were still unsolved in Southern California. Robert Loggins had been found dead in September 1980. Roger Duvall and Jeffrey Nelson were last seen in February 1983. Their bodies had been discovered days apart. Police also found fibers in a rug in Randy's garage that matched fibers on the body of Scott Hughes. He was the man found dead alongside the Riverside Freeway in April 1978. In addition, items belonging to a man found near the Grand Rapids, Michigan area were also found in Randy's home. So everything is starting to piece together here. Now, let's take a quick pause. Thank you, Capone. I knew one of you would do this. So just for comparison, $50,000 in 1982 is worth $159,476.17 today. That would be a phenomenal salary. Yeah, thank you for that. James says, I was making $1 a week in 1982. I was 12. And you blew it on Mad magazines. You know what? When you put it like that, that's not bad. So good for you, James. So I don't know about you, but listening and researching this case in regards to the evidence that police found in regards to Randy linking him to these crimes and these other crimes to each other, it really reminded me of the Gilgo Beach case that is currently ongoing with Rex Heuermann as the suspect who's been under arrest, allegedly, for committing those crimes. I don't know. I kind of was drawing parallels to that. So I don't know about you, but that's what I was seeing. But again, could be me. So prosecutors got a hold of that notebook and they were able to crack the code that he had written everything in. For example, 2 to 1 inch hitch referred to the murders of Roger Nelson and Jeffrey Duvall. Maureen Carson referred to Richard Keith, a Marine last seen in Carson, California. His body was discovered in Laguna Hills in 1978. Jail out referred to a murder he committed hours after being released from jail on June 11th, 1978. Parking lot, that referred to the murder of Keith Crotwell, an 8-year-old boy. Yes, I repeat, an 8-year-old boy whose severed head was found by a group of fishermen. So Randy Kraft was now being called the Scorecard Killer. Randy was initially charged with only just one murder, Terry Gramble's, and was held on a $250,000 bond. Again, $250,000 back then, huge amount of money. He pled not guilty. Judge Gary Ryan thought Randy was so dangerous that he tripled his bail. At a bail reduction hearing 1 week later, Randy's attorney referred to him as, quote, passive, nonviolent, and hardworking, end quote. That is one way to spin it for your client. That is a defense attorney trying their hardest. It was almost comical when I read it, but got to give it to the defense. They're trying to do their job here. Let's see, how about some garbage pail kids? Oh my gosh, Undercover Mermaid. Yes, I remember those. Oh man, you're bringing me back. You are bringing me back. Hello to the better Paul. How are you, hun? Hope you're doing good. So, okay. So the judge also accepted Randy's not guilty plea and revoked bail entirely. By September 1983, the charges against Randy stood as follows: 16 murders, 11 counts of sodomy, 9 counts of sexual molestation, and 3 counts of robbery. January 1984, prosecutors filed written notice of their intent to prove 21 additional murders spanning 12 years in 3 states. Investigators stated that he targeted hitchhikers between 18 and 25 years old. Many were drugged and sexually tortured before being strangled, typically with their own belts. The prosecution also believed in some of the murders that Randy, he didn't act alone. Physically, they're saying it just wouldn't have been possible. They believe that his roommate, remember, Jeff Graves, maybe occasionally helped him. However, before police could question Jeff, he had died of AIDS, so this could not be brought up at trial. September 27th, 1983, after 5 postponements, Randy's preliminary hearing began. It lasted 7 weeks. Judge John Ryan barred cameras from his court, but rejected a defense bid to exclude spectators. Forensic pathologist Walter Fisher and Robert Richards detailed the injuries suffered by specific victims. Judge Ryan found the evidence sufficient to hold Randy for trial. Randy's attorney during the preliminary hearing, Doug Otto, would not be there when Randy would stand trial. Why was that? Because August 1984, he withdrew from the case. He was put off by Randy's insistence on serving as co-counsel. Doug was quickly replaced, and the legal maneuvers dragged on. This ended up costing California taxpayers $2 million by April 1986. Again, $2 million of 1986 kind of money. Huge now. That would be huge. But then again, with some of the high-profile cases that we see now, we're seeing that as well. So it's not typically uncommon, but I think back then, that was something that wasn't as heard of. So it was a bit more shocking to the community. Hi, Merc Boxcar. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. What took law enforcement so long to catch Randy Kraft? Good question, Mimi. Let's stay tuned and find out more. And then by the end, if you don't have that answer, we will review, but I think you'll have a good idea by the time. But as I just think about it, like one of the things I just said was the amount of cases that they're looking to charge him with, and that it would span several states. Think about that in the 1980s. We saw this big time with the Ted Bundy case. Law enforcement back then didn't share information like they do now. There was no internet like this. There was no, when I say sharing of information with other departments and other agencies, there was a lot of wanting to, for example, one police agency wanting to be the one to solve it in their area, not wanting to bring in other assistants. So what you would see makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily share that information, but also if information wasn't being shared, then they don't know of all these other cases in other areas. And we see that not just within one state individually, but when you're adding multiple states, there's no way that information was being shared. It just wasn't happening. And that's really, really unfortunate. Again, we've seen that with other cases. The most notable one was Ted Bundy, which I will definitely be covering later on in Danny After Dark. I'm just kind of holding out on that one because that's kind of what started my interest in true crime. So I don't know, building myself up to that, even though I've been doing this for over 2 years now. But yeah, I would say so far with what we've been talking about this case, I would say that's a big part of it. Because then even if he acted in just one state, but different areas of the state, it wouldn't surprise me that police officers and detectives from each department weren't sharing with each other, which is really, really unfortunate. But we see that time and time again when looking back at these older cases. Well, hello, Paul. Welcome. Capone coming through. That would be a bail. So $5,616,587. That's wild. And yes, he was making good money back then, but not enough for this type of bail. No way. Absolutely no way. I was living on USMC pay in the poorhouse. Oh, back in 1986 timeframe. Okay. I love how you say the better, Paul. That makes me so happy, Mimi. All right. So yes, let's carry on with our friend Randy. So, okay. As we know, Randy's defense lawyer backed out. So September 26, 1988, Randy's trial started. Finally, he pled not guilty. The defense, well, his new defense, I should say, tried to squash all evidence from the 1983 searches. However, that was denied. Defense attorney C. Thomas McDonald's opening statement, it dismissed the state's case as suspicious innuendo and prosecutorial rhetoric, end quote, while calling Randy a homeowner, taxpayer, a hard worker, just like any other citizen of our country, end quote. The bottom line, Mr. Kraft killed no one. Prosecutors called more than 157 witnesses and presented 1,052 exhibits. May 1st, 1989, closing arguments ended and jurors deliberated for 11 days to reach their final verdict. He was convicted on all 16 murder charges, plus 1 count each of sodomy and mutilation. Unable to claim innocence after the guilty verdict, Randy's lawyers called the psychiatrist to testify that Randy's violence was something that he had no control of. Several ministers opposed to capital punishment also appeared. Finally, Judge McCartan branded their testimony silly, and so far, afield it's stupid. And that was a direct quote from the judge. That is awesome. He was having none of it. And it's very interesting how the defense went from he's your average person, he's any citizen, to, well, yes, he does have a violent side and he has no control over it. Again, they're just doing their job, but it's an interesting way that they're trying to spin it. Let's see where you guys are. Hi, Tony L. Welcome. Good to see you. All right. Yeah, you guys are going back with the 80s references. Oh, I'm loving it. If I wasn't doing this episode, I'd be right in there with you for all of it. But yeah, you guys have your fun talking about that. I'm super, super jealous. So, Prosecutor Brown reviewed the scorecard list. Again, we discussed that earlier. And he told jurors there's nothing wrong with him other than he likes to kill for sexual satisfaction. Well, the jurors agreed, and they recommended the death penalty on August 11th, 1989. The penalty phase of his trial, it took 4 months. And on November 29th, 1989, he was officially sentenced to death. The judge stated, quote, I can't imagine doing these things in scientific experiments on a dead person, much less to someone alive, end quote. Randy has still stated that he is innocent. Quote, I have not murdered anyone, and I believe a reasonable review of the record will show that, end quote. I just want to point out, he's saying he didn't murder anyone. Again, he's driving around with a dead body in his car, buckled in, and just so casually. I mean, I don't know. It's bizarre. It's a really bizarre way of thinking, but you know, they got to come up with what they can. August 11th, 2000. In one of Randy's later appeals, he argued that his original trial was riddled with more than 20 legal errors. For example, he claimed the judge erred in allowing prosecutors to use as evidence the death list. His attorneys alleged that the list, a sheet of paper bearing 61 cryptic entries that prosecutors called the scorecard of victims, improperly prejudiced the jury against him. The Supreme Court, they disagreed, and they said that the list was relevant to the case. In 1993, Randy filed a $60 million lawsuit against the publisher and author of a book about his case. He claimed that the book had unfairly portrayed him as, quote, a sick, twisted man, end quote, and thereby it affected his prospects for future employment. For future employment, let's just all take a step back here. The book the book, not his actions, not his charges, not his sentencing, not the fact that he's scheduled to death, but the book is going to interfere with prospects of future employment. Just had to stop and rephrase that to you guys. That was one way to view a negative book about yourself. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I was very amused that was the angle that he went after. And again, trying to sue for 60 million. I don't know, far reaching, but then again, you have all that time in prison. You have nothing but time. So it doesn't fully surprise me. It's just, again, one of those interesting twists with the case. Let's see. No, I actually hoped that you were dissing the podcast. I'm actually now more disappointed that you weren't dissing him, Mimi. But I'll let that go for now. Oh, the mustache man. Oh, the 80s when podcast only had a mustache. I'm all for the Paul bashing. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, because maybe you don't watch the Paulcast Manson Saga discussion panel, Paulcast is one of my co-hosts over there. So anytime I can make fun of those guys over there, I'm all for it. It's all in good fun. Hey, Dancing Firefly. Hi, good to see you. Let's see. Yeah, you guys are just, yeah, James, when I got a bump in allowance up to $5 in 1895, I felt rich. Yeah, money, it was very different back then. That's for sure. That is for sure. All right. So, all right, the $60 million lawsuit. And again, that the book affected his prospects or could affect his prospects of future employment. So that lawsuit was dismissed by California Supreme Court in June 1994. Randy Kraft is by now in his late 70s, early 80s, and is now currently awaiting execution on death row in San Quentin State Prison in California. That is the case of Randy Kraft, also known as the Scorecard Killer. Now, do you guys have any questions or comments on this case? Mimi, I know you had one earlier, kind of how he was allowed to get away with it for as long as he did. And I know I pointed out and discussed a little while ago that not only was he committing these crimes in just one state, but at least 3. That's what he was charged with. Could it be more? Who knows? But at least that's what the detectives had kind of narrowed down, was to this for 3 states. So another possibility too, and what do you guys think about this? So one of the things that the defense brought up was, could Randy's lover, roommate, Jeff, had been involved? Could he have been involved in this? And if that's the case, I'm not saying that in a way where it would shift any responsibility from Randy to Jeff, but that could, on the one hand, I could see how that could assist him if he had somebody to help him either successfully commit these murders or more so successfully hide the bodies kind of as well as they did. It wasn't for a while where, yes, police were finding them, but they weren't really connecting that they were all from the same person. If you think about it, even once they caught Randy, all these murders were not connected initially. They had to not only defer back to what the evidence showed when they were able to compare items from his home, but also items from his, scorecard notebook. So I think that's how he was able to get away with it for so long, because they weren't connecting. If they were able to catch him on one back then, I'm sure they would have been able to kind of put a halt to some of the future ones, obviously. But where they weren't making that connection, I can see how that would go on as long as it did. Another interesting thing too is, as we had discussed, so again, his roommate Jeff wasn't able to testify or even be interviewed about this because he had passed away from AIDS. So by the time Randy went to trial, again, Jeff was no longer alive. It would be interesting to see if Jeff was alive at that time, what information would have came out. Because as we can see in a lot of true crime cases, there's usually a bargaining tool. So for example, if they felt Jeff was involved, or if they had evidence that he might be involved, or if Jeff if he was involved and just kind of cracked under pressure during interrogation, police most likely would have offered in some type of deal, in exchange for your testimony, either a reduced sentence or sometimes we see immunity. In this case, I'm not so sure because the amount of murders were pretty high, but I'm pretty sure he would have been offered something. Because again, you wanna get the main guy. So if they can offer Jeff or the possibility of a reduced sentence for information, I'm sure that would have happened too. But I don't know. Do you guys think Jeff was involved or not? I don't know. It's interesting because I kind of, as I was doing the research, I was going back and forth thinking, based on their schedule and everything, could he have been involved? And at some points, it seemed they were kind of joined at the hip. So kind of he would be aware, or if not fully aware, kind of something's going on. How he couldn't put the two together, I wouldn't, I don't know. But then again, there were other times where based on their schedules, they seemed to be pretty distant. So I don't know. I was going kind of back and forth with the ebbs and flows of their relationship, where there were times where I'm like, okay, during this year period, if these crimes were happening as in succession as they were, Jeff would have had to have been aware of something going on. But then there were other points in their relationship where I'm like, between this year and this year, they weren't really on the same path. They weren't even, involved in spending time together, vacation to save their relationship. They were in therapy, but weren't putting in the work. At that point in time, I could see how Jeff wouldn't be aware of what was going on. But that's just my thought. Just curious what you guys think about that. Let's see what you guys are saying. One dude in the gay bar, the other looking in the back seat of the car. Are you... Okay. Took me a second. Sorry, Capone. Okay, I get what you're saying. Yep, that's one angle too. Again, if Jeff was involved, that's one, tag team that to make sure that the victim doesn't escape. And yeah, a more successful crime, unfortunately. But again, I don't know. I keep going back and forth with, would somebody have been involved? If so, the likely person would have been Jeff. But yeah, thank you for one luring dudes back so that they could team A and team B. Yeah, that would make the most sense. That would absolutely make the most sense. So I do have to say, with this case, like, I knew the basics of the Scorecard Killer, Randy Kraft, but I didn't know the specifics. I guess I didn't know as much of the connection that police had to make once they got the notebook and then tying things from his home to the victims. I think I thought they were able to tie things together a lot quicker, and without that, so I hadn't looked into this case in so long, I kind of forgot that. So as I was researching it, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, the police, they had their work cut out for them with this. And it's very unfortunate that it went on as long as it did. It really is. And it's what I was thinking of too was, again, think of them, he was charged in 16 of the murders. There's still so many that he was not charged in. At this point in time, are police going to go back and retry and add those? No, he's already on death row. But it's interesting that I kind of wondered why that didn't go forward, especially if it was in another state. Because typically what we would see is, and again, it all comes down to taxpayers' money. It really does. But we've seen it before with other cases where one state, they have their charges, and then the other state wants to jump on top of that. So if anything happens, any appeals, anything with that first, that they now have a successful and secure case that's already happened and a conviction ultimately, ideally. But that did not happen in this case. But yeah, it amazed me that he's still awaiting execution this much longer. I know people in death row, again, San Quentin in California, I shouldn't be as surprised. I thought this goes back a long time. Think about it. We're in 2023 now. Again, 2023, it was 1989 that he was, he had his trial and that the penalty phase happened again, and he was sentenced to death. Officially sentenced November 29th, 1989. We're 2023 right now. He's still on death row. That blows my mind. That, talk about a cost to taxpayers, that is wild. For those of you in California, that is wild. But this isn't the only one. This is not the only one. So yeah, that is that. The case of Randy Kraft. If you guys have any extra questions or comments on the case, feel free to post it now. Otherwise, if you think of something later, or if you guys are catching this on replay, leave a comment in the video if you have any questions about this, and yeah, I'll answer as best I can. This is one of those cases. There's a lot to this case, and again, I just kind of gave you guys the basic summary of it, but yeah, that is that. Let's see. It's California Governor Newsom will never let me execute it. Thank you, Art. Art Simpkins, welcome. Yeah, this is not the first case in regards where Governor Newsom would have come into focus. So that is not very surprising, but I see exactly what you're saying. So Mimi says, imagine Randy Kraft trying to pick gay guys nowadays. It would be too hard to tell what gender someone is. It'd be like potluck. Well, I see what you're saying. I think it would be, nowadays with social media and the various dating and hooking up apps, I think it would be a lot easier. So much easier for him to select victims, dare I say. But then again, with cell phone tracking and technology nowadays too, it would be that much easier to catch him if that was the case. So I can kind of see it going either way, but I get what you're saying, kind of comparing what was being done back then to what could potentially be done now if he was acting his crimes out kind of circa 2023 era. So makes sense. Hi, Jeffrey. Good to see you. Oh my gosh, long time no see. I hope you're doing good. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen you. So many hitchhike killers back then. Oh my gosh, yeah. And that is an understatement for sure. But yeah, that was a time. That was the time. Mm-hmm. The pansexual singer. Oh my God, you guys. Just saying more people are coming out these days as gay. I think, obviously it depends on location, in the times, and there's a lot of factors in there. But I think it's more accepted now in 2023 than it was back when Randy came out. I'm just trying to go back in my notes. So yeah, he came out in 1969. So a big difference back then compared to now. Absolutely. I would almost bet $1 million on the fact that there'd be more people coming out now in 2023 versus 1969. So yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. It kind of all tied together in regards to when he came out to his family, and at the same time he was discharged from the Air Force on quote unquote medical grounds that year. So could it have been connected? I don't know. Because back then that was certainly not okay to be gay in the military. Absolutely not. So just kind of the timeline with anything. I couldn't find anything further than that, but I kind of questioned if that was why he was discharged, but not sure. Let's see. All right. All right. You guys are making fun of each other. Have at it. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of Danny After Dark. Again, Randy Kraft, the Scorecard Killer. As I said at the beginning of the episode, I will not be doing the weekly True Crime and Chill later on this week because Mr. Beckham, one of my co-hosts over from the Manson Saga discussion panel on the podcast, him and his girlfriend are coming to Boston to visit. So I will be busy with them and showing them Boston, Salem, and everything in between. So I'm really excited for that. So probably next week, I'll wrangle in Beckham at some point and we can do a little recap of the trip because I'm sure there's going to be 1,000,001 stories from that. So let's see, do a Beckham live stream. He has talked about that. And I'm just like, no, you've all this time and effort and cost to come visit. We're not pulling up YouTube and doing a show. Like, no, we're going to be out and about and just doing as much tourist stuff as we can. But I will let him know that, James, you have him in high demand. All right, everybody, you have a great rest of your night and a great rest of your week. And until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.